Hello again, everybody. This is Brother Chooch thinking out loud about the end times. We are on video number 10 of our Rapture Convergence Theory. Pretty amazing, guys. We are moving along, and before you know it, we're either going to be done with the series or with the Lord. I'm hoping that we're with the Lord before the series is over. Wouldn't that be nice? We're definitely in springtime now of 2020, and we've been talking about at length that this theory definitely looks at the strong possibility that 2020 is our time to fly, and 2020 fall is the time for the tribulation period to start. So we will continue to explore in this video why we believe 2020 is more than likely the year that this is all going to go down. And we shared in our last video, number 9, about the red heifer and how everything seems to be lining up very nicely for the red heifer to be ready for the temple, right? Everything's set for that pretty good if everything goes according to plan. But we don't know what the future is, only the Lord knows. But just the fact that there's 2 red heifer candidates that are looking good right now shows that, to me at least, God's working all these things together into a convergence, and the convergence time is now. This particular video, we're going to look at Psalms. We believe that the Psalms might very well be pointing to 2020 to 2027 as your tribulation period time, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Just a little background before we get started. We did a series on this already in thinking out loud about the end times. We did a series on Psalms, and we tried to use an objective look at a claim that the late J.R. Church made. He wrote a book, actually, Prophecies in the Psalms, where it was argued by Mr. Church that Psalms being the 19th book of the Bible, that the number Psalm correlates to the year, the 19th century, to what happened in Israel that particular year. For example, Psalm 1 would relate to 1901. Psalm 20 would relate to 1920, what happened in Israel, from Israel's vantage point in 1920. Psalm 100 would be the turn of the century, so that would be the year 2000. You get how he was looking at it? And what J.R. Church was claiming is that every single psalm had something in it that correlated to what was going on in Israel that particular year. Now, we concluded in our 4-video series, and we looked at every single year from 1900 to 2027, and we concluded that we do not agree with J.R. Church that every single psalm, that every single year correlates to, excuse me, oh, wait, I don't want to get you guys, as far as I know, I'm not infected. Excuse me. Oh, where did here it is. I put this on. Alright, so what, I don't want to get you guys sick. So what J.R. Church was saying is that every single psalm number it has significance of what happened in Israel that particular year. We don't agree with that. We did not see the correlation there. My glasses are getting fogged up now, so I'm going to have to, I think I'm more than 6 feet away from every one of you guys, so I think we're good, right? Social distancing. We don't agree with J.R. Church's statement. However, we do see that there were a number of Psalms that seem to give an allusion to or indication of things that really did happen those years for Israel. And in particular, and you'd have to watch because we're not going to get into it in this video here. But if you want to watch that series and see, we went into pretty good detail of what Psalms we were impressed with. So Psalm 48, Psalm 67, those had to do with the years where Israel became a nation and when Israel got Jerusalem back. And there's a number of Psalms that you just say, wow, I see a correlation there. Knowing that, why is this particular video a part of the Rapture Convergence Theory 2020? Because we see a correlation, Keegs and I, of Psalm 120 to 127 seems to fit into the timeline of the tribulation period. But here's the beauty of this channel, is that you get to decide to be the judge. You could say, I don't see that, I don't agree with that, or you could say, wow, I see something there. Because again, this is just another piece that we feel is pointing to how the Rapture Convergence Theory 2020 seems to make sense, seems to be fitting nicely with Scripture, and also seems to be pointing to, again, a rapture in 2020, and also the tribulation period happening in 2020. So let's start our study. Now, because we're just focusing on Psalm 120 forward to 127, there's an interesting thing that we must take note of right off the bat, is that Psalm 120 is the beginning of what's called the Psalms of Degrees, the Psalms of Ascent. So what would happen is when the pilgrims, other Jews, would come to Jerusalem during the feast times, during the holy convocations, they would sing these particular psalms as they ascend to Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was elevated in comparison to the other cities of Israel. And so if you could picture these caravans and these groups traveling to Holy Jerusalem to worship and to celebrate these feasts, and they sang these praises, these songs, the songs of ascent, and it starts with, lo and behold, 120. All right, so I find that interesting because when we stop and think about it, well, obviously the church is looking forward to ascending to heaven before this tribulation starts. But in a sense, as Israel goes through the time of Jacob's trouble, even though they're going through calamity and a lot of horrid things, it's as if they're heading towards their true Messiah and the Lord. So that's really, really encouraging, I think. Now, knowing that, let's start Psalm 120. And it starts right off the bat with this verse, which I think is so fitting to what is going on in regards to looking at these 7 particular Psalms. It starts with, in my distress, I cried unto the Lord, and he heard me. In my distress. So when you stop and think about it, in distress, you could think of a synonym for that, and you could probably replace that with tribulation or with trials. And this is, like I said before, this is the time of Jacob's trouble. It's Israel's trouble. It's not referred to as the time of the church's trouble. And here's, as if Israel was speaking, and I know this is the psalmist, but he's saying in my distress, or it's almost like in my tribulation, I cried unto the Lord, and he heard me. So as I look at this, I say to myself, what better way to kick off, if this indeed is correlating to the tribulation period, to even use a word that is so closely associated with tribulation as distress. And it talks about, and we're not going to go through verse by verse, we're just going to try to hit the highlights, but it says, talking about delivering my soul, O Lord, from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue. Now, when you think about lying lips and a deceitful tongue, the first thing that comes to mind is the devil, Satan, because he's a liar. He's the father of lies, is he not? And there's another verse that I'd like to draw your attention to that I think relates to all this, and it's in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and it's verse 8. It says, and this is talking about the end times, and then shall that wicked be revealed, which is the Antichrist, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Even him, this is verse 9, whose coming is after the working of Satan, with all power and signs, and listen to this, and lying wonders. So when you stop and think about this, the man of perdition, the man of sin, who's the Antichrist, is going to be just like his father. Matter of fact, he's going to be man, the incarnate of Satan. And the scary thing about this is that he will try to have a relationship with Israel, but it will be based on lies and deceit and falsehoods and broken promises. And so in the second verse, and actually it's the second and the third verse of Psalm 120, because in verse 3 it says, what shall be given unto thee, or what shall be done unto thee, thou false tongue? Right? So it's like it's calling out the deceitfulness and the lies of the Antichrist. And what will be done? It says in verse 4, sharp arrows of the mighty, with coals of juniper. What does that mean? It's as if Israel is saying that I will not recompense you, the Lord will recompense you. How? With sharp arrows and with the coals of juniper. So supernaturally, we know that if this is referring to, and we'll get into this in a little bit, if this in any way is referring to Ezekiel 38 and 39, which we know is a war that still needs to happen, that involves Russia and her allies, who's going to handle defending Israel? It's going to be the Lord in his sharp arrows. Now, I believe he's going to use an earthquake and other means of destroying the enemy as they come down, swarm down on Israel in the mountains. But the Lord will be the one to do it. And it refers to coals of juniper. The juniper tree was used back in biblical times for its charcoal. It would burn hot and it would burn long. And that's the way the Lord's going to treat Israel's enemies. It's going to be an intense heat and a long burn. So I think that's a very descriptive language that that the psalmist is using, and yet prophetic. Woe is me that I now listen to this now. Woe is me that I sojourn in Mesech, that dwell in the tents of Kedar. Now let me just grab, I've got more notes here. Very interesting. Mesech is the sixth son of Japheth, right? And if you trace where these people eventually settled, it is in what we understand to be now Russia. So in this verse 5, woe is me that I sojourned in Mesech, and Israel had plenty of Jews in Russia, a lot less now, because a lot of them came back home to Israel, that I dwelled in the tents of Kedar. Now, Kedar is, you could go back and trace them as well, because Kedar was the son of Ishmael. And Ishmael, we know his descendants became the Arab people. And these people, the tents of Kedar, were made of dark goat hair, black, if you will, black coarse hair, and they became the Arabian people. And here's Israel saying, we sojourned in Russia, basically, and we dwelt in the tents of the Arab nations, the Arab people. And so he's saying that, whoa, that we had to do this. Isn't it interesting that, could this possibly be alluding to the war that will be taking place, which we believe will be in the very near future, that involves Russia and some Arab allies? Okay? In 2020, could this happen? Well, we believe that there is a strong possibility for that. Just ends this on, my soul hath long dwelt with him that hateth peace. Listen to this. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. So historically, Israel has tried to attain peace in the region, but that hasn't happened. For the most part, the Arab nations did not want peace. It refers to here in verse 6 with strong language, with him that hateth peace. And Israel saying, I'm for peace, but when I speak, I try to negotiate, I try to compromise, I try to make covenant with them, they are for war. Which is, I think, a very straightforward and clear description of Israel's history with their neighboring nations. They don't want peace with Israel. They want to wipe Israel off the map, and they still do to this very day. So that's correlating with the year 2020. Could there be, in summary, could there be more dialogue between Russia and Israel, where there's deceit and lies going on, and where they attack Israel, the Gog-Magog war takes place, God with his sharp arrows and coals of juniper takes care of the enemy, and where, again, Israel's seeking peace with their neighbors, but seriously, again, not being able to find that. When we get to Psalm 121, that would correlate with the year 2021. Now, according to our timeline, 2021 would be the first full year of the tribulation period. And let's look at what this psalm talks about. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence my help comes. Now, what is this speaking of? The Lord is the one who's truly the helper and protector of Israel. If this timeline is correct, the beginning of 2021, we should have probably a covenant signed with the Antichrist by now, because the Antichrist, we believe, the covenant that's confirmed with many is going to be the start of the 7-year tribulation period. Right? Now, think about this. With everything, all the craziness that's going on in the world right now, if the Ezekiel 38-39 war were to break out, and Israel gets attacked, and even though they're protected by God, they still probably would be ripe to agree to a peace deal with the Antichrist, so that they could feel at ease that no other nation's going to try to invade or attack them, because they got the protection of the Antichrist and his nations, or whatever he's 10 confederacies or whatever he's leading up. And so by time we get to 2021, the clock's already ticking on the tribulation period, if that treaty's signed in the fall. And then we might find that 2021, Israel's in a place where, even though they got this peace deal signed, you do have the Jews recognizing that their God, Yahweh, has protected them. So they look up to the hills for where their help comes from. And you get the flavor in the psalm that there's a gratefulness to God for what he has done to protect them from their enemies. In verse 4 it says, "Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep." So they realize that God's omniscient, God is omnipresent. He doesn't take naps, he doesn't go on vacation, he's always alert, attentive, and came to the call. Verse 5 refers to the Lord as Israel's keeper. It says that the Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. So what is that? The Lord's your right hand is your hand of strength. God shadows over it. What is that? He protects it from the sun. He allows Israel to maintain their power. Okay, that's one of the things that Yahweh is doing for them, has done for them. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. Regardless of time, of temperature, of season, of light or dark, they recognize God protects them from injury. Verse 7 and 8. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. So the whole flavor of 121 has to do with acknowledging the relationship that they have with Yahweh, the protection that he provides them in all different circumstances. And it's really a psalm where get this feeling of worship and gratitude. All right, now we go to the year 2022, which would be Psalm 122. I was glad when they said unto me, let us go into the house of the Lord. So now the focus is on the house of the Lord. What is the house of the Lord? It's the temple. Is 122 referring to what might be happening in 2022, which you have the temple up and running, all the gears are in place, rolling, sacrifices are happening, and the old ordinances and everything that the temple did back in the day is happening once again. There's many in Israel who desire this. Many in Israel who believe that peace will not happen until the temple is built and the sacrifices are offered again. This is all possible. Like I mentioned before, the red heifers are there. Red heifers are needed to sanctify the people in the land for the temple. There's a great chance by in the agreement that is confirmed with many, there could be language in there and permission to allow Israel to rebuild their temple. They got everything in place, folks, to get that thing up and running in months. They could have it up and running in 2021. 2022 might be the first full year that the temple is operating. Our feet shall stand within thy gates, O Jerusalem. That's verse 2. So you get this. You know, I believe that many of the Jews feel like Jerusalem's not quite complete right now because of there's no temple. And now they'll be able to have a place besides the Wailing Wall to go and to worship and bring their offerings and thanksgiving. Whether the tribes go up, this is verse 4, the tribes of the Lord unto the testimony of Israel, to give thanks unto the name of the Lord, for there are set thrones of judgment, the thrones of the house of David. So it's, again, you got the distinguishment of the tribes of Israel going up, having a place to go to give thanks to the Lord, where there's could be a place where the Lord rules and he judges, thrones of the house of David. Verse 6, pray for the peace of Jerusalem. They shall prosper that love thee. Okay, because the Israel has that connection with the temple, is that the temple's up and running, there will be peace, they will prosper. Peace be within thy walls, and prosperity within thy palaces. For my brethren and companions' sake, I will say, peace be with thee. So you got all this peace, and Jerusalem's connected and has purpose again and is restored. Because the house of the Lord our God, I will seek thy good. It just has a real strong flavor of the temple, which makes sense in our timeline because we know that there needs to be a temple for the abomination of desolation to occur. So that's 2022. 2023 should correspond with Psalm 123. Says, I lift up mine eyes. This has, again, sort of the same flavor of Psalm 121. Again, a looking up. Unto thee I lift up my eyes, O thou that dwellest in the heavens. It's, again, looking to God. And perhaps these verses are a picture of the remnant that will be saved through the tribulation period, because I don't think that everyone in Israel is going to be able to echo these words that the psalmist are saying. In verse 2 it says, behold, as the eyes of the servants look unto the hand of their masters, and as the eyes of a maiden unto the hand of her mistress, so our eyes wait unto the Lord our God until he have mercy upon us. So here's a verse just completely expressing a level of dependence on the one who has power and authority over them, even to the degree of a servant to his master or a maiden unto her mistress. Okay? A real humbling of self, of realizing the relationship with Israel with God is one of great dependence. It says, have mercy upon us, O Lord, have mercy upon us, for we are exceedingly filled with contempt. Now, this is where you start noticing a shift, and I think this is the important thing to get out of this particular psalm, is the shift now. You say, we are exceedingly filled with contempt. So it seemed like things are going great because of the temple in 2022, but in 2023, it's asking God for mercy because there's a contempt that's being focused upon this nation again. It seems like the flavor of the nations, the views of the nations are now starting to shift away and against Israel. Our soul is, verse 4, our soul is exceedingly filled with the scorning of those that are at ease. So, and with the contempt of the proud. So who are the ones who are at ease and those who are proud? Could it possibly be the elite? Could it possibly be those who are the head of the nations, the Antichrist himself? Those who are at ease, those who are proud. Now we know in the tribulation period there's going to be great, terrible things coming on the earth. But the last people that seem to feel the effects of calamity would be those who are buffered a bit because of their wealth or power. They have their palaces, they have their hiding places. They have such a surplus that they could not be quite as affected as the masses would be. So as you see the shift in 123, it's a great segue into Psalm 124, because now we're entering into the 3.5-year mark. And we know that's highly significant in the tribulation period, because in the 3.5-year mark we have the abomination that causes desolation. We also have the beginning of the Great Tribulation, which is the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, which is more severe than the first half. So listen to this now when we get to 124. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, now may Israel say, it had not been the Lord who was on our side, when men rose up against us, then they had swallowed us up quick. When their wrath was kindled against us, could these three verses be talking about the Lord now allowing the Jewish people, remnant Jews, their eyes to be open to see that this false Messiah who desecrated the temple, who's claiming to be God, and is taking away the daily sacrifice, that they are recognizing if the Lord was not by their side, that they would have been swallowed up quickly. That this guy really is not their ally. He's their enemy, the Antichrist. And so it goes on to say, listen to this. This is really interesting. Verse 4, when the waters had overwhelmed us, the stream had gone over our soul, then the proud waters had gone over our soul. If you turn to Revelation chapter 12, verses 14, 15, and 16, we read this. Now, Revelation 12 is a great chapter because it kind of gives a synopsis of what the tribulation period is going to be about. It says, and to the woman who were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, at times, and half a time, that's 3.5 years. And the woman with the wings is Israel. And the fact that she has wings like an eagle sounds like there was a supernatural, at least, assistance in the Lord getting this remnant that is of Israel into a place in the wilderness that will keep her from being injured by this dragon, or even killed by the dragon, from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away of the flood. Now, many believe that the Israelites, or the Jews, are going to find protection and respite in what is known in Jordan as Petra. I'm going to show you some pictures of Petra. This is a place where it's got a natural defense against attackers. It's got rocks and high cliffs, and it's a easily defendable place that has plenty of room to safely take care of and hold hundreds of thousands of Jews, if need be. All right? And what's the Antichrist going to do? Well, the Antichrist is going to send waters. Though that could be interpreted in a couple different ways. One is that he could send out an army. Water could be interpreted as many numbers of a large amount of people. And he could send those armies out and try to get the Jews to get them back in Israel, or persecute them, or kill them. Has that flavor of when the Exodus took place. Or, interestingly enough, in the winter months, Petra sometimes has a flash flood, where waters enter in quickly. It happened a few years ago, I believe, where 18 or so people died in Petra because of the flash floods. So, is it possible that the Antichrist, knowing where the Israelites are staying and not wanting to be accused of destroying this people, massacring them, that he allows, he gets something to happen where great waters could flood them out, and he could blame it on something, a natural cause for that happening. So that's something to wonder about. And yet it talks about that when the waters were cast out of the serpent's mouth, that the earth opened up her mouth and swallowed up the flood and the dragon cast out of his mouth. So again, the Lord supernaturally will protect his people as they stay at Petra during the second half of the tribulation period. Swallowed up quickly. When we get back to that psalm and you stop and think about the words that are used, swallowed up quickly, waters had overwhelmed us, proud waters had gone over our souls. You see a connection there between what should happen in the tribulation period about at this time and what the psalmist is writing about. That's Psalm 124. Okay? And then at the end of the psalm it says, "Blessed be the Lord who has not given us as a prey to their teeth," referring again to their enemies. "Our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers." The snare is broken and we are escaped. So you've got a nice correlation here, because you could say, and J.R. Church did say this, the fowler's snare would be one who traps fowl or birds for prey and would set a net up, probably some bait of some kind, and catch the birds so that he could eat them or sell them. Well, the Antichrist, according to J.R. Church, is a good picture of a fowler. He's one who wants to catch the bird, right? And so you don't catch a bird by making yourself known. You catch a bird by hiding and disguising yourself and setting a trap. And that's what the Antichrist will do, is set a trap. The trap is something, at least at this point of the tribulation period, that the Lord spared the bird, Israel if you will, of getting caught in the trap by the Antichrist. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. So you get that recognition of, we got spared from getting trapped by the Antichrist, and the Lord is the one who did that. Psalm 125 should connect with the year 2025. It says that they that trust in the Lord shall be as Mount Zion, which cannot be removed, but abide forever. What's interesting is that in 2025, there should be Israel protected and fortified. It's interesting that the psalmist used this verse in describing Mount Zion, because Petra is like a mount that's carved into, and their enemies. Our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken and we are escaped. So you've got a nice correlation here, because you could say, and J.R. Church did say this, the fowler's snare would be one who traps fowl or birds for prey and would set a net up, probably some bait of some kind, and catch the birds so that he could eat them or sell them. Well, the Antichrist, according to J.R. Church, is a good picture of a fowler. He's one who wants to catch the bird, right? And so you don't catch a bird by making yourself known. You catch a bird by hiding and disguising yourself and setting a trap. And that's what the Antichrist will do, is set a trap. The trap is something, at least at this point of the tribulation period, that the Lord spared the bird, Israel if you will, of getting caught in the trap by the Antichrist. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. So you get that recognition of, we got spared from getting trapped by the Antichrist, and the Lord is the one who did that. Psalm 125 should connect with the year 2025. It says that they that trust in the Lord shall be as Mount Zion, which cannot be removed, but abide forever. What's interesting is that right now, in 2025, there should be Israel protected and fortified. It's interesting that the psalmist used this verse in describing Mount Zion, because Petra is like a mount that's carved into, and it's fortified. You know, it's referring here as the mountains are round about Jerusalem, so the Lord is round about his people. So I'm wondering if the Jews, as they're looking at these the rock formation and how they're protected, if they feel protected by God. And this language makes a lot of sense. For the rod of the wicked shall not rest upon the lot of the righteous, lest the righteous be put forth their hand unto iniquity. The lot of the righteous, could this be referring to the remnant of Israel? So the rod of the wicked will not rest on this remnant of Israel. You know, and it says, lest the righteous put forth their hands unto iniquity. So God right now is protecting this remnant. He's not, there's no punishment going on. And again, that seems to fit well with what we think will be going on possibly in the year 2025. Now, in the year 2026, we're getting now to the last full year of the tribulation period. So this is towards the very end. We see as fall time of 2027. That's it. That would mark 7 years from the fall of 2020. This again is a song of decrees. This is a psalm that was sung. It says, when the Lord turned again the captivity of Zion, we were like them that dream, that our mouth filled with laughter and our tongues with singing. Then said they among the heathen, the Lord hath done great things for them. The Lord hath done great things for us, whereof we are glad. So you get this sense that the Lord's about to release them from their captivity. They're not going to be in Petra that much longer. There's a faith that's going on and a hope that's going on that the Lord will rescue the remnant of Israel. Talking about laughter, singing praise amongst the brethren, and boasting of the Lord doing great things. It says, turn again our captivity, O Lord, as the streams in the south. So there's like this plea to him. Take us away from this captivity. Now listen to this in verses 5 and 6. They that sow in tears shall reap in joy. This might have dual meaning. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. So one is, it could be referring to the Jewish people who up to this point have shed many tears, have suffered greatly. But what was sowed in tears, they'll reap joy once their true Messiah comes back at the second coming. He that goeth forth and weeps, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. So they could relate with that when it comes to the harvest season, because these remnant Jews are about to be harvested. These are the good figs that are now going to be harvested by the Lord. And there will be what started off with weeping, the long journey Israel's been in, will finally bring forth this precious seed that has been planted will bring forth fruit. There will be rejoicing, and sheaves will be brought. Now, we could look also at this as a dual meaning. If the Lord Jesus, did he not sow in tears and reap in joy? I mean, he sowed seed, eternal seed, by him dying on the cross and being buried in the earth. But from that came forth quite a crop of souls that are saved. And so will he not rejoice when he has reaped his harvest? And that, I believe, will happen at the rapture. But when he returns, he's going to bring the sheaves with him. So at the second coming, who's coming with him? The wheat, the good wheat, the sheaves. Okay, so not only will he save Israel at that time, but he's going to bring the sheaves of those who've already been saved with him. Can it be interpreted that way? are those who trust in Jesus now and that are taken in the rapture and are considered wheat, because I believe that the church is the wheat harvest. Will we come back with him at the second coming? According to Scripture, we will. So Jesus is bringing us back with him when he returns. Could this section of 126 be alluding to that? Now, in 127, in the year 2027, according to our timeline again, we've got some really major significant things that are going to happen. One is that you're going to have Armageddon, you're going to have the second coming, and that's not really mentioned here per se, but what is mentioned here has a strong flavor of the millennial reign. Now let me read you this psalm. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. So in other words, Israel through the centuries have tried to establish themselves, to build their own house, but unfortunately, oftentimes they chose not to obey God. Now, for the first time, God is their true king and will establish them in the millennial reign, and they will succeed. The Lord is the one now building the house, not man. They have labored in vain. Not anymore. Lo, the children are a heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. Now what's going to happen? There's going to be Jewish earthly subjects during the millennial reign who will live a lot longer, but they're going to be fruitful and multiplying and repopulating the earth. Okay? And they're going to have 1,000 years. 1,000 years that will happen. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man who hath a quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. So again, you get this idea of a house being built, blessing that's going to happen. Because in verse 2 it says, it is vain for you to rise up early and sit up late to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. So he gives them rest, he gives them a heritage, he gives them children, he blesses them with fruitfulness, and those who produce, repopulate the earth, the Jews, they will be in his favor, they will receive his blessing, and it will be an awesome, awesome time. So having said all that, and you see the real change in 127 to 126. What do you guys think? Does this hold any water? Does this seem to correlate? Write in the comment section. Agree, disagree. Maybe you see something in here that we didn't see. That's quite possible. But I think we hit the main points. So does Psalm 120 to 127 correlate to what will happen this year and to the year 2027? Well, we believe that this has significance, and that's why it's part of our convergence theory. So, study this, pray about it. We love to hear from you. We also would love to see you here, there, or in the air. God bless you all.